Good morning, everyone. It is Wednesday, April 14th, and this is Nadex Morning Analysis. We are going to take a look at some hot spots in the market today. There's not a lot going on, but there are a couple of times today where there's going to be potential market moving news. So we will get into that before. My name is Todd Rich. I'm with Nadex. With me from Keep Trading Simple, Brian Caprice. Before Brian and I jump into those hotspots that I was just sort of alluding to, we need to share this disclaimer that trading involves risk and may not be appropriate for everyone, that any trading decisions you make are solely your responsibility and your own risk, and that this is an educational session. Please do not construe anything Brian or I say as a buy or sell recommendation. We are doing this for your education purposes. So as I mentioned, today it is a little bit of a quiet day. The markets are going to open slightly in the green, but what we've got going on, one, it's Wednesday. Yesterday we had inflation, the CPI numbers in the U.S., and we're seeing inflation. We knew we were going to see that; it was expected. But with that came some. A creep up in gold, saw finally some movement. It went a little bit higher. Oil in play went higher, got above that 60 level. We're going to talk about oil because the oil inventory reports in the U.S. come out at 10:30 a.m. Eastern, 10:30 this morning. So in a couple of hours, 9:30 Central, we're going to get the oil inventory reports. So oil might be something that you want to look at today. Fed Chairman Jay Powell is actually going to be speaking again today. That's at noon Eastern, 11 a.m. Central. Whenever he speaks, you never know what could happen or how someone can interpret something that he says. So we've got Powell speaking today at noon, and then a setup for tonight. Australia, they're doing their unemployment numbers. So it's 9:30 p.m. So we're going to look at a setup for tonight, 9:30 p.m. Eastern, 8:30 p.m. Central. We'll take a look at the Aussie dollar. So there's some things that we can look at today. That's the whole goal here, is to put you on some hot spots and when you might want to be focusing your efforts. So Brian, you want to kick us off and talk a little about inflation and oil?
Yeah. So obviously, you guys know, the inflation kicked in yesterday. We talked about that, so I don't want to completely rehash that. Going into today, and again, we're seeing kind of the inflation talk. There's a couple different things down here talking about inflation, prices. Greenback is being heavily traded. So you're seeing all that kind of mention of it. You're talking about stimulus from New Zealand last night. It's coming up. I mean, we knew it was going to be here. They told it was going to be here. Then it came and people were like, oh, it's here. But remember, it's supposed to be transient. It's supposed to go back down again. Interestingly enough, the story that I think we need to focus on today is really crude oil. If you remember from some of the inflation readings that we had previously, most of it was inside of the energy sector, particularly with crude oil. Looking at that right now, and again, one of the reports we get a little bit early on crude oil is the API number the night before. Here it is. The API number actually came in higher than expected. There was a down draw of 3.6 million barrels for API, which is a little bit different than the number we're going to get today, and it was supposed to be 2.6. So it was a little bit more. The interesting thing to that, though, is that gasoline inventories increased by 5.6 million barrels compared to 4 the week before. So it's kind of interesting. I don't know I'm not sure where everybody lives out there, but I can tell you where I am. It looks like crude oil prices are going higher, but we're getting more and more gasoline, and they're just stockpiling it. But interestingly enough, in this article, they do mention J&J. You guys remember what happened with J&J yesterday? They basically halted it across the United States. It says oil prices ended higher on the day, but upside was kept in check by concerns that a setback for J&J's vaccine delivery will delay the economic reopening, slowing the recovery in energy demand. Now that, we mentioned that yesterday that, hey, listen, this means we have 2. Are they going to push things back? We know that Australia increased their target. So interesting that people are now talking about, hey, listen, without J&J, is that going to slow the reopening? Is it going to have an effect on the economy? And it absolutely could. I mean, right now, this is what we're dealing with. Now, this is the first week. We're sitting right here yesterday. And remember, we were talking for this. I don't remember if I had one drawn here and we had one drawn here. We were looking for an area to get long, right? We were in this lower third, this green area, but we didn't really get a pullback. It just kind of based sideways. It grabbed a little tiny level here, but unfortunately, it did go up, but it didn't get back to where we wanted to get a really, a cheap entry, right?
A melt up.
Maybe it's maybe it's greed, maybe it's not. It's like, oh, we want the clean entry, and it just kept slowly grinding higher and higher. Now, here's one thing that's been different than we've seen for the last 2 months. Here, right here, and I'll move this across just so I can pinpoint it for you. Right there is the European Open. Okay, right there. I'll make it a little smaller. Right there is the European Open. You'll notice we don't have a big swing up or down in the European Open. Nothing. This is the first time in almost 2 months that we haven't had major movement at the European Open. It did go up slightly. It did run into a level. And again, this is a level up top. You can see there was a gap here. It came up and filled the gap and then really kind of pushed us down from that 61 level. It did have some sellers above. And again, we got to be cognizant of that. But again, not really a big push. I'm wondering if the estimate is going to come in very, very close to the forecast and it's going to be a non-mover. The reason I bring that up is because, again, I'm not the only one. Dan has also talked about some neutral-based strategies. Because there is so much hype and there's been so much movement in oil lately. I mean, we go from 61 to 58 to 61 like 4 times in a week, right? Because of that, there is currently a lot of premium inside of options. If you believe, and again, we're at an area, so there's a, kind of an area of risk that we've seen some buying step in, and vice versa. We know there was a lot of pressure up. There is actually neutral-based strategies that you can take advantage of, combining a couple different factors, a couple different assets, trading asset classes at Nadex to play somewhat of a neutral strategy if you think we are just going to kind of roll over and base sideways. So I think today is one of those rare opportunities where we may actually be able to use it for an oil inventory report. Remember, there's certain things we need to worry about with options, whether it be traditional or, regular Nadex options. When there's expected high volatility, there is high premium, and there are ways and strategies to take advantage of high premium-based options. Vice versa, when there is no premium, there are different strategies that you need to use. And right now, based off the strike widths and the perceived kind of premium stacked in, I think today may be one of those neutral strategies we use.
Yeah. You know what? I am going to just show real quickly. Let's open this up a little bit more.
And these are not trade rather interesting, guys. Just make sure everybody knows these are not trade recommendations.
No
these
trade recommendations, but just ideas. I mean, yeah. I'm actually just pulling across these old levels. This is what's amazing is how relevant these levels kind of stay. There, sorry, from last time I used the chart. No, actually, I'm going to bring this one across as well, real quickly. There we go. All right, so what Brian was referring to, I mean, there are ways. If you don't think that this is going to break out a big move, let's and I'm going to do this too because we can see this creep higher, right? There are ways where you could say take two. It's called a strangle. It's 2 binary options. If you think it's going to stay range bound, you can sell one up above and buy one below, and if it stays within the range, you can collect premium on both ends. Now this is this is a daily. With the oil inventory reports, we actually might want to, you might want to choose the 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. ones if there's any. There's probably right. You just got to take a look at what the different the prices are and when these expirations are. There's now with as we get only an hour away, there's not quite as much premium in them as there would be in the ones that are daily. And if I go back over to commodity binary options, you've got your dailies, you got your 2-hour ones, 8 to 10 a.m. But you can the way you do that is you trade the range around it. The way you trade the range around it. You don't think it's going to go a lot higher, so you're expecting this to go to 0. You're buying one below, you're expecting it to go to 100. Now, if it breaks out of that range, you're protected, right? Yeah, you know what your potential profits are, you know what your potential losses are. And if it breaks, and you do them in equal numbers, but if it breaks above or below you and settles there, you would end up um, losing on the trade. But if you think it's going to be a slow day where it's not going to make a big move, and so there's different ways to play that. Yeah, and it's just based on what we're seeing, where there's just not a lot of action, just this melt up in oil, mostly from the news yesterday. But we don't know. We'll see what the inventory reports and see how retail traders interpret it. All right, we've also got Powell speaking at noon,
Yep.
and then tonight I want to do this. I want to give you some opportunity to talk about the Aussie dollar as well.
Yeah, so far right now we've seen kind of the dollar. If I go up to the dollar index, where is it? Right here. You can see the dollar index has been kind of getting kind of hammered, right, for the most part. And again, this has to do with the fact that they're not raising interest rates. They want to put more inflation than normal. We want to see a moderate time, which nobody knows what that means. And it's kind of beaten up from yesterday's CPI, based off of really not so much just the CPI, but kind of Powell's overall kind of take on this. So right now, as I mentioned yesterday, that this is kind of the news release for the week that I'm looking at. This is, and I keep saying this, and they keep being great trades. Please, somebody look at it this week. 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is one of the biggest releases for the Aussie. It's the employment change and the unemployment rate. It's expected to be great, right? It's supposed to be dropping down, although the employment change is not as hot. This is a great number. If you look right now, the Aussie dollar in 24 hours is up 74 pips. It's the biggest mover of any currency pair, straight up, meaning Aussie strength, dollar weakness into a high-profile news event. Now, here's what the chart looks like. Let me go back down to Aussie dollar. There's what the chart looks like. As you can see, it's being skied forward. We talked yesterday, and I think we mentioned it. We mentioned it on here as well. Here was hit 1, 2, 3. We expected a break. There was your basing in the area saying, hey, go long when we break, and it did. It went all the way up. Now we are hitting a level just a bit higher. I'll go back up to a 60 minutes so you guys can see it. It's not the best of levels. It's a pullback, right? It dropped, it pulled back, and continued to drive forward. But what I would do right now is I would kind of keep track of this and see what happens. Here's kind of the test and kind of the push. With the U.S. market opening, I wouldn't necessarily be surprised. Obviously, this is extreme dollar weakness right now. I wouldn't be surprised if it holds over. And then again, if Powell mentions that inflation is raising faster than expected, that may lead the dollar hawks to get in there and be like, oh, ho, ho. Does that mean we could raise interest rates sooner? Right. So again, it is kind of set up for somewhat of a reversal. Whenever we have a move this fast, this far in one day, we expect some type of a move. So there's a minor move this morning. We could be looking for it to drop back down to the same level, right? This old level that used to be, again, it was a top. Hit number 4, we expect it to break. It did. It based and then broke. Now we got to expect the same thing when we come back into this location. So the way you're going to trade this one tonight is you're going to look at it with the news release coming out at 9:30 p.m. Eastern time. I would really get in there around 9 o'clock if you can, 8 o'clock Central. Kind of see where we're at. Look for levels of basing. See if we've driven back down again. See if we're still floating around a level up here. And again, maybe we've pulled back down, and if we're sitting at this level, there may be opportunities to take a before news trade if we're in a level. If not, again, there may be a bit of a reaction we could take afterwards. If it were not singing in the best of level, or you don't feel confident with it, what I would do is I would jump over into the call spreads. Remember, Nadex contracts will reprint at around 6 p.m.
Right.
Look to see where the floor and the ceiling is around that time. If we're rather close to it, remember that the advantage of a call spread is even if there's a little bit of a whipsaw back and forth, it does not take you out of the trade. But if you can get something that is, offering some type of a minor risk at one of these two levels, whether it be top or bottom, remember we are, with it being pink here, we are in this top area where we should be looking for shorts, right? So ideally, we either hold here looking for a short. If we push back up into this level here, whoops, not that one. If we push back up into this level up here where we talked about before, the 77.42, by some chance, if we get a big push because of what Powell says, that's even more reason to start getting short in a position.
Right.
So a couple different opportunities. This one is a prepare yourself for later type trade more than anything else. Okay.
Yeah. And I do just want to show everyone on the binary options, right? You go into the Forex, the Aussie dollar. Now, if this is something you were looking at in the Aussie dollar, the binary options, you would want to look at the 11 p.m. ones, right? Because the announcement comes out at 9:30, so the 7 p.m.s will have already settled. So you're really probably looking, if you're looking for a move, the binary options, I mean, right here, these would be the ones that you would be looking at. And that's where you'd probably want to focus on. Remember, these ones would be, they would go for an hour and a half after the announcement before they settled. And so based upon what you see at the time, you might be able to find an opportunity to trade. Again, 9:30 p.m. Eastern. Now, Brian mentioned call spreads. If you go into the call spreads, our middle product, go into the foreign exchange, you go to the Aussie dollar. We haven't printed those ones yet. We will print them later today. You'd have to take a look at what the ranges are in the call spreads once they have printed later this afternoon. You could already see the 9 a.m. ones expired. Refresh. Let's just see what we got.
And I would use the dailies for that one, kind of an overnight based trade, because it is so late at night. I would be a little bit cautious with the weekly because there's a lot out there, but
and a lot of time.
What 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There is 6 weekly call spreads for the Aussie dollar. And again, don't forget you can also use the Aussie yen over at Nadex as well. So it's kind of the same play for both.
All right.
Drop down at 9 o'clock, look for 30-minute levels, and take it before news.
All right, perfect. Brian, is there anything else that you wanted to share before we call it a day here?
No, not so much right now. Like I said, everything else is more or less flat inside of the currency markets. Like I said, the Aussie dollar was the biggest mover. Tomorrow morning, right at 8:30, we do have core retail sales, the retail sales number, the unemployment number, and the Philly Fed manufacturing index. So I would expect for those of you that are able to get up earlier, get in there at 8 o'clock, do the same thing, look for some pre-market news levels, particularly in anything dollar-based like the euro dollar, but also look for the indices. At 8 o'clock, futures traders will start logging in. Drop it down to a 15-minute look in the NQ, YM, and ES over here in either of these 3 products over in Nadex.
Right.
I think there could be some opportunity before we meet tomorrow.
All right. So just a quick recap. 10:30 a.m. Eastern, oil inventory reports. Seeing oil do a creep up as well as gold after the inflation numbers yesterday. Powell speaking today at noon. And then tonight, 9:30 Eastern, look at the Aussie dollar or even the Aussie yen with their unemployment reports. All things that you could be taking a look at today for opportunity. If you got any questions for Nadex, customer service at nadex.com. Questions for Brian, support at keeptradingsimple.com. Brian's very accessible. You feel free to shoot him an email. With that, I also want to mention I dropped into the chat. If you're brand new to oil and gold trading, we do have a boot camp coming up for folks who are new to the markets. So would like to learn how to day trade gold and oil markets. Be sure to click on that. You can register. It's coming up May 4th in a few weeks. With that, want to wish everyone good luck in the markets. We will catch you again tomorrow.